I felt the weight of silence as I looked at the starry sky on that summer night. At 38, my life had turned into a predictable routine in the small coastal town of Cedar Cove. I'm Thomas, a naval engineer who retired early after an accident at the shipyard. Now I spend my days restoring old boats in my workshop in the back of my house, a refuge from the emptiness that had settled among the walls I share with Helena, my wife for 5 years. If you're wondering how a quiet guy like me ended up in such a complicated situation, leave a like. I promise this story will make you question what you would do in my place. My workshop had become my sanctuary, smelling of worked wood and fresh varnish. The sound of tools and the steady rhythm of manual work gave me the peace I couldn't find at home. Helena and I met when she moved to Cedar Cove with Riley, her 22-year-old son. At first, we were happy, or at least I thought we were. But over time, Helena found comfort in the wine bottles hidden in the kitchen cabinets, while Riley and I built a respectful but distant friendship. In the mornings, I would get up at sunrise, make a strong cup of coffee, and walk to the beach before starting work. Sometimes I'd see fishermen returning with their nets, and we'd swap stories about the sea and the weather. Later in the day, I'd head back home and usually find Helena asleep on the sofa, an empty glass beside her. Riley typically got home from his job at the Animal Rehabilitation Center around 6, and we'd briefly greet each other before each of us slipped into our own corners. Until that Thursday, that changed everything. The sky suddenly darkened that afternoon, signaling an off-season storm. I was finishing up the restoration of an old sailboat when the phone rang. It was Riley, his voice tense as he told me the car had broken down on the coastal road. I hesitated just a moment before grabbing the keys to the pickup. "It's all right. I'm coming to pick you up," I replied, feeling a strange unease. I found Riley soaked from the rain that was just starting, standing by the car with the hood open. His athletic body trembled slightly as he put away the tools he'd tried to use to fix the vehicle. "Thanks for coming, Thomas," he said, as he climbed into the pickup, raindrops running down his angular face. "I think the alternator is done for good. We can tow it tomorrow," I answered as I turned on the heater. "You're soaked." I looked toward Helena before we left. She was sound asleep on the sofa, as she typically was after her third glass of wine. I left a note explaining where I was heading, even though I knew she probably wouldn't notice our absence. The drive back was quiet, but different from the awkward silence that usually hung between us. There was something more, an indefinable tension that made me uneasy. We stopped at a roadside diner, the neon lights reflecting in the puddles in the parking lot. "She won't wake up anytime soon," Riley commented as we entered the empty place. "We could actually have a decent dinner for the first time in weeks." Something in the way Riley said it, with no judgment and just stating a fact, hit me hard. It was true. How long had it been since we shared a normal family meal? Helena barely touched her food these days, preferring her liquid dinner. We sat at a corner table and ordered burgers and fries. The conversation started hesitantly, first about Riley's work with rescued animals, and then about the boats I was restoring. Gradually, the words began to flow more easily. "I never asked why you left naval engineering," Riley remarked, his green eyes fixed on me with genuine interest. I felt a lump in my throat. Few people ever asked me about that, and Helena had long stopped caring. "The accident at the shipyard didn't just affect my leg," I replied, surprising even myself with my honesty. "Something inside me broke that day too. My confidence, maybe." Riley nodded in understanding. "I get that. Sometimes it's not the visible scars that hurt the most." The look we shared in that moment created something new between us. A mutual understanding, a recognition that we were both silently carrying our own burdens. The rain had stopped by the time we left the diner, though the air still felt heavy with moisture and electricity. I drove in silence along the coastal road, the headlights cutting through the darkness as the sound of waves echoed in the distance. Then Riley broke the silence and suggested something that caught me off guard. "How about we stop at the lookout? I haven't been there at night in years." I hesitated for a moment. The Cedar Cove lookout was famous for its spectacular view of the ocean and stars, a spot many couples visited to take it all in. It wasn't exactly the kind of place a stepfather and his stepson would normally go together. "Are you sure? It's getting late," I replied, my voice carrying an inexplicable tension. "Please," Riley insisted, his tone soft but firm. The storm cleared the sky. The stars must look amazing now. I relented and turned the pickup onto the side road that led to the highest point on the coast. I parked near the edge of a cliff where a wooden platform offered a panoramic view of the ocean. The sky was a black canvas studded with stars like diamonds, and below, the full moon cast a silver path over the dark water. We got out of the car and walked up to the railing. The The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed, refreshing after the rain. We stood side by side, leaning on the weathered wood, taking in the vastness before us. "Sometimes I come here alone to think," Riley confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "When things get too heavy at home." I felt a pang in my chest. I had never really considered how Helena's situation affected Riley. In my own selfishness, I only thought about how her alcoholism had ruined our marriage, never about its impact on her son. "It must be hard seeing your mom like that," I said, trying to choose the right words. Riley turned to me, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "She's sick, Thomas. She's been like this since my dad left us. But what hurts more is seeing two people living in the same house and still feeling completely alone." Those words hit me like a wave. It was exactly how I felt, lonely, even while sharing a roof with other people. Without even realizing it, my hand reached out and rested on Riley's shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort him. "You're not alone," I said, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his damp shirt. Riley covered my hand with his. "You're not either." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The wind, the waves, even the twinkling stars all seemed to slow down in the face of that intense moment. I saw in Riley's face a mix of vulnerability and determination that took my breath away. "Thomas, he began hesitantly. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been feeling for a long time." My heart raced. Part of me already knew what was coming, and another part fought desperately against that truth. "Maybe we should head back," I interrupted, abruptly pulling my hand away. "Helena might wake up and worry." A flash of disappointment crossed Riley's face, quickly replaced by a sad smile. "We both know she probably didn't even notice we were gone." The silence that followed was deafening. We returned to the pickup without exchanging a word, each lost in our own thoughts. The tension in the vehicle was nearly tangible, as if a third, invisible passenger rode with us. When we got home, we found Helena exactly as we had left her, sleeping on the sofa. The wine bottle that had been half full was now empty by her side. Riley mumbled a barely audible good night and quickly went upstairs to his room. I stood in the living room, watching my wife, a woman I once loved and who now felt like just a shadow of the person I once knew. I covered her with a blanket before heading to my own room. After all, we had been sleeping apart for months, a silent arrangement that naturally emerged as our relationship crumbled. Lying in the darkness, I couldn't shake the image of Riley's look at the lookout or the feel of his hand on mine. Something was stirring inside me, something disturbing and yet irresistible. I fought those thoughts until dawn, when I finally gave in to a restless sleep. The next few days were an exercise in avoidance. I spent more time in the workshop, obsessively working on the boats, while Riley hogged extra shifts at the animal rehab center. Helena sank deeper into her spiral, becoming more and more absent, even when she was physically there. Then, on a Tuesday night almost 2 weeks after that lookout incident, everything changed for good. The house was quiet. Helena had gone out for a girls' night, which we both knew was just an excuse so she could drink without facing our silent judgment. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Riley appeared in the doorway, wearing only sweatpants. The light from the fridge partially illuminated his defined torso, highlighting every muscular curve. He froze when he saw me, as if he hadn't expected anyone to be there. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I just came to get some water." "It's okay," I replied, trying to stay casual as I cut the sandwich in half. "Want a sandwich too?" Riley hesitated before accepting the invitation and sat on the high kitchen counter. I handed him a cup of cold water and set half the sandwich in front of him. We ate quietly for a few minutes, the only sound the ticking of the old clock in the kitchen. "Thomas," Riley finally broke the silence, placing his empty cup on the counter. "About that night at the lookout." "We don't need to talk about it," I interrupted, feeling panic rising inside me. "We do," he insisted, his eyes locking with mine in an intensity that left me defenseless. "I'm tired of pretending there isn't something between us." My heart pounded. "Riley, that can't happen. I'm married to your mom." "Married?" Riley laughed without humor. "You call what you have a marriage? You haven't even talked in months. She barely sees you, Thomas, not the way I see you." I closed my eyes, trying to regain control. "That doesn't matter. There are boundaries we just can't cross." "Why? Because of social conventions? Or because you're scared of what you feel?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and unavoidable. When I opened my eyes, Riley was standing just a few inches away. I could feel the heat coming from his body, and I caught a subtle scent of his soap mixed with something uniquely his. "I'm 25, Thomas. I'm not a kid. I know what I want," he whispered as he moved closer. "And what do you want?" I asked, my voice nearly failing. "Just this." What happened next was like a devastating storm breaking after years of pressure. His lips met mine with a wild urgency that tore down all my moral defenses in seconds. My hands, which should have pushed him away, instinctively pulled him closer. The world around us disappeared. There was no kitchen, no home, no sense of right or wrong. There was only that moment, that connection that went beyond any relationship I had ever known. Our bodies moved in perfect sync, as if they were made for each other. Every touch ignited a new, uncontrollable fire on my skin. Every sigh between kisses fed an insatiable hunger I never knew existed, making me completely forget who we were to each other. Riley led me out of the kitchen and into the living room, where we ended up on the sofa. Our mouths stayed together for almost the entire journey. In the dark living room, lit only by moonlight streaming through the windows, our bodies intertwined like waves crashing on the shore, inevitable, powerful, primal. While I discovered in him a forbidden landscape I never imagined I'd desperately want to explore. When we finally pulled apart, panting and changed, Riley rested his head on my chest. We stayed like that for a long time, our hearts gradually slowing until they found a common rhythm. "This changes everything," I whispered to the darkness. Riley traced invisible patterns on my chest with his fingers. "Some things need to change, Thomas." I woke up with the brightness of dawn flooding the living room. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I felt the weight of Riley's head on my chest, his arm around my waist, and the reality of last night hit me full force. I carefully brushed a lock of hair from his sleeping face, giving myself a moment to admire his relaxed features before the guilt inevitably set in. And it hit me, a devastating wave that left me breathless. What had we done? How could we ever face Helena after this? I tried to get up without waking Riley, but he stirred when he sensed my restlessness. "Good morning," he mumbled sleepily, a smile forming on his lips before his eyes were even fully open. "Riley, we need to talk," I said, my voice harsher than I meant it to be. His smile vanished as he noticed my expression. He sat up, running his hands over his face to shake off the sleep. "You're regretful." It wasn't a question. It was a painful fact. "It's not that simple," I replied as I got up to gather our scattered clothes. "What we did, it can't happen again." Riley stood still, watching me collect the clothes as if he were watching a slow-motion accident. "You can't just switch off what we feel, Thomas." "It's not about what we feel," I argued, handing him his clothes without meeting his eyes. "It's about what's right, about respect, about your mom." "Your mom?" Riley said, laughing bitterly as he pulled on his sweatpants. "The same one who's probably passed out at some friend's place right now? The one who hardly even notices we exist? That doesn't justify betraying her trust." I dressed quickly, as if putting on more layers between myself and the world could somehow erase the memory of Riley's touch. "So is that it?" Riley asked, now standing and his voice trembling slightly. "Are we just supposed to pretend nothing happened and go back to our miserable routine of silence and avoidance?" I ran my hands through my hair in frustration. "I don't know what to do, Riley. All I know is that I can't be the person who destroys your family." "What family?" he asked, stepping closer. "A mom who's an alcoholic and can't even tell what day it is? A marriage that exists only on paper? That isn't a family, Thomas. It's a prison we built for ourselves." His words hit me like a punch in the gut because they carried a truth I'd been avoiding all along. Before I could respond, we heard keys at the front door. Helena was coming back. We exchanged panicked looks before instinctively pulling away from each other. Riley hurried upstairs while I quickly rearranged the sofa, trying to erase any sign of what had happened. Helena shuffled in, swaying slightly, her eyes red and her hair messy. She stopped when she saw me, blinking as if she were trying to recognize me. "Thomas? What are you doing up so early?" she asked in a hoarse voice. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, swallowing a bitter half-truth. "How was your night with the girls?" She waved her hand vaguely, ignoring the question. "I need a shower and a few hours of sleep. Don't wake me for lunch." I watched her climb the stairs, clutching the railing to steady herself. When I heard her bedroom door close, I sank onto the sofa with my head in my hands. The following days passed in a strange limbo. Riley and I kept our distance, communicating only when absolutely necessary and only when Helena was around. Still, our eyes met across the dining table, loaded with unspoken words and repressed desires. The tension was so thick, I even wondered how Helena didn't notice, but she was too lost in her own world to care. Then, on a Thursday, almost 2 weeks later, I got a call from the hospital. Helena had fainted at a local supermarket. The doctor said it was severe dehydration and that she'd started showing early signs of liver damage from chronic drinking. He recommended she be hospitalized for detox. Surprisingly, Helena agreed. Maybe the scare was enough for her to realize she needed help, or maybe she was just too tired to fight anymore. Either way, I helped her pack for a 60-day treatment program at a specialized clinic in the next town over. On the morning she left, Riley and I drove her to the clinic. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we said goodbye, Helena hugged me weakly. "I'm sorry, Thomas," she whispered. "For everything." "Just get better," I replied, feeling a pang of guilt as I realized my main emotion was relief, not sadness. On the way back, Riley broke the silence that had settled between us since that night. What happens now? The question hung in the air like a mist over the ocean. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. "I don't know," I finally admitted. "Part of me wants to do the right thing, support Helena in her recovery, try to fix our marriage. And the other part?" Riley asked in a soft but intense voice. I parked the pickup at the same lookout where everything began to change between us. The ocean stretched out before us, vast and unchanging, indifferent to the human drama playing out along its shores. "The other part knows our marriage ended long before that night between us," I confessed, finally looking him in the eyes. "Helena and I are two broken people who clung to each other out of fear of loneliness, but we're more alone together than we ever would be apart." Riley nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "And what about us?" "We're complicated," I said, a small smile breaking through despite the gravity of it all. "What I feel for you, I've never experienced anything like it before. It's intense, scary, and wonderful all at once. But the world isn't going to accept it easily. People will judge. They'll talk. My mom deserves honesty and the chance to heal," Riley interrupted. "And we deserve the chance to figure out what this really is." He paused, his eyes fixed on mine. "I'm not asking for us to run away together tomorrow, Thomas. I'm asking that you don't give up before we even try." Something in me settled with his words, like the sea calming after a storm. For the first time in years, I felt clarity. "I'll talk to Helena when she's better," I decided. "She deserves to know the truth, no matter how painful. Our marriage ended long ago, regardless of what happens between us." Riley reached across the space between us and intertwined his fingers with mine. "One day at a time?" "One day at a time," I agreed, squeezing his hand. The next month passed in a kind of strange limbo. Riley and I slowly rediscovered each other, talking late into the night and sharing stories we'd never told anyone before. We slept in separate rooms, both aware that we needed to sort things out with Helena before we could fully explore what was between us. We visited Helena at the clinic regularly, watching her slow, steady recovery. With every visit, I saw a little more clarity in her eyes and strength in her voice. During our last visit, about 2 weeks before her scheduled discharge, she asked to speak with me privately. "I need to tell you something, Thomas," she began, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "The therapist here taught me about honesty and taking responsibility for my choices." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Our marriage ended long ago," she said simply. "I think we both know that." I felt a lump in my throat. "Helena, no, please, let me finish," she said. "I wasn't a good wife. I wasn't a good mom to Riley. Alcohol was my escape from a reality I didn't want to face. A reality where I couldn't love you the way you deserved." Her words should have hurt, but instead, I felt only relief and gratitude for her honesty. "When I go back home, it will only be to collect my things," she continued. "My sister in Portland invited me to stay with her while I rebuild my life. I think a fresh start is exactly what I need." "And what about Riley?" I asked, wondering how he would take the news. A small smile appeared on Helena's face. "Riley has always been stronger and wiser than I deserved. He'll understand. In fact," she paused, her eyes meeting mine, "I think he's already found his place in the world, and I suspect it's by your side, Thomas." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. "What do you mean?" "I'm not blind as an alcoholic," she replied with a sigh. "The way you two look at each other, it's something that never existed between us. At first I was shocked, then hurt. But now, I just want you both to be happy." I went home that day with my mind racing. I found Riley on the porch, watching the sunset over the ocean. I sat beside him, and our hands found each other naturally. Helena is heading to Portland after her discharge, I said, watching his reaction. Riley nodded slowly. She told me earlier this week. I think it's the best decision for her. We sat in silence for a few minutes, taking in what that change meant in our lives. She knows about us, I finally admitted. Somehow she realized. Riley turned to me, surprise in his eyes. And what did she say? She said she wants us to be happy, I replied, still hardly believing the conversation we'd just had. A slow smile spread across Riley's face, lighting his eyes in a way that made my heart race. And what do you want, Thomas? I looked out at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in a perfect line. For so long, my life had been defined by duty, convention, and the fear of disappointing others. Now, for the first time, I allowed myself to consider what I truly wanted. I want to see what we have, I answered honestly. I want to wake up every morning by your side and find out where this journey takes us. It won't be easy. People will judge, they'll talk. Let them talk, Riley interrupted, gently holding my face in his hands. Some connections are too rare to sacrifice on the altar of other people's opinions. When his lips met mine, I felt like I was finally coming home after a long journey. The future was uncertain. There would be obstacles, judgments, and tough days ahead. But for the first time in years, I was ready to face those challenges with someone who saw me completely and loved me anyway. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to find love in the most unexpected places, the answer is yes. Sometimes the person who shows you the way home is someone who's been right by your side all along, just waiting for you to have the courage to look in their direction. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments. Have you ever found connection where you least expected it?